What if the antidote to stress, distraction, and mental exhaustion wasn't more effort, but more flow? Today's guest has lived through breakdowns, breakthroughs, and now teaches how neuroscience or flow can unlock your potential. Today's guest is someone who's lived many lives in one body, in one lifetime. Anthony Palacin is a qualified mechanical engineer turned coach, educator, and speaker. He lives with bipolar disorder, left behind antipsychotic medication through natural healing, and found purpose by helping others channel their focus, performance, and mental health through flow states. Anthony is the founder of palacin.co.uk, and his work blends neuroscience, spirituality, and high performance psychology designed for modern minds in an overwhelmed world. He's been featured on podcasts like Ideas and Impact, How to Get 8 Times More Done, and Being Human. And today he joins us on Attention is the Currency. Anthony, welcome to the show, and so good to have you on today.
Thank you so much for having me, Daniel. It's a pleasure to be here.
Very welcome. Well, we'll dive straight in because we know a little bit about you, Anthony. So we'll jump into the questions. And you've said you've lived many lives in 14 years. Let's start there. What's the story?
What's the story? So I'm 32 now, and all these lives in 14 years have happened since my 18 years old. I started by training as a mechanical engineer because that's what I felt I was being pulled towards. I was interested more in math and sciences than literature and history. So I went that direction. And then I discovered festivals, music festivals, and I also discovered that I was diagnosed with bipolar. I mean, this partly happened in link with the festivals. There was a big psychological shift that happened for me because of festivals, but it was also linked to other things. And having been diagnosed with bipolar took a huge priority in my life. I had to investigate it. Um, it led me to exploring entrepreneurship as a path for greater freedom in my personal life and greater fulfillment, but it also led me to a thing that I was more passionate about as I was working on the bipolar, understanding to what extent I was going to be doomed by bipolar or to what extent I was going to be doomed to take medications that were putting me in a depressive state. If that was going to be my whole life, I needed to know as soon as possible. And it turned out that it doesn't have to be. I've been 5 years free from manic depression and psychotic episodes, and I've been 5 months free from medication. But the journey is actually what was most important in rewiring my system and changing my lifestyle to become an upgraded version of me. And along the way in that journey, I discovered the neuroscience of flow, which really was like a boost, turbo fuel in the jet's engines, if you were to say.
Definitely. Well, that answers my next question of leading into flow. So, what was the turning point where things began to shift mentally and spiritually to go into that state that brought you there?
So I found a strong sense of purpose first by experiencing coaching when I was starting to learn a bit more about the business journey. And that gave me a lot of flow, but I didn't have a label for it yet. It wasn't until 2 years later and my last psychotic episode that I started going deeper both into spirituality, and then I also discovered a training that would become my coaching specialization. I actually discovered flow through an ad which was targeting me, and that became such a key for me because I realized all of my behaviors in the past, from being addicted to video games and poker, from doing a lot of partying, doing drugs, going to festivals, and even the times where I was sucked into something professional. Like I would get sucked into an engineering problem, I would get sucked into DJing, I would get sucked into a creative project or a writing project. And I found out that the key that linked all of these experiences together was the flow state. So for me, it made total sense. I'm going to go train in this flow neuroscience, and it's going to help me understand my past, both the productive and the toxic, and it led me to cook up a more healthy version of me that I can access this state in more healthy ways and more frequently and more deeply.
So what is the definition for the flow state? What because a lot of people you throw around the word, as you said, you got targeted on an ad, which is great marketing by the way on a sideline. But what is your definition for flow beyond on that? Because it's sort of the where you've arrived and you found it on the ad, but I'm interested more to explore it.
So flow is the optimal state of consciousness that we can be in, both in terms of productivity and in terms of feeling good, as well as performance. So all of our performance metrics like creativity and focus, they go through the roof. So does our learning and memory. We most easily recognize the state of flow when we don't recognize the sense of time passing by. We're so absorbed in the activity that we're doing, so focused in it that 3 or 4 hours could fly by, and we will feel at the end of it that, wow, that felt like an hour. And we might also lose our sense of physical self and maybe spiritual self, like the boundaries between yourself and the activity itself and the worlds or the universe could dissolve. So that those are characteristics of the flow state.
Yeah.
And it tends to happen in those activities that we really enjoy doing.
Well, in regards to, because, well, I guess you've just said it in the enjoyment of it, but being such a powerful antidote to modern stress and burnout and mental fatigue right now, is that what the enjoyment coming into the from the flow state that's sort of brings that in?
The key difference is that flow is trainable. So a lot of people will have activities they like and activities they don't like, but they'll have a mindset of using activities they like as a way to escape their life and the activities they don't like. What what I bring, the perspective that I bring with flow is not only can you train more flow in activities that you don't like, you can also train your mindsets around activities that you don't like in order to experience more flow in them because they're when everything is in alignment, like your passion, your purpose, your lifestyle, your goals, and you're clearly headed towards a vision that you have, that you're building, that you want, then there shouldn't be any task that you don't like. Even things that are less appealing naturally, like having to do your taxes, you just kind of take them not only as a productivity need to do, but also as a spiritual growth, as an obstacle that is here to forge you into a better, more up-leveled version of yourself.
Yes. Well, the way I definitely got into that mindset with the taxes where, and now I just say, well, I'm blessed because I made money. So, and trying to rework that in mind, but it's what happens to the brain and the body when somebody is in flow state? What sort of reactions are going on?
So we can't talk about flow unless we talk about the other parts, other states of consciousness that we're in. And overall, the combination is about finding balance. It's about increasing more flow, yes, but it's also about increasing our capacity to mentally recover when we're not in flow. So this is also part of the training, what to do when you're in flow, what to do after flow, and what to do to kind of prepare for getting into flow. But when you're in flow, there's a few key neurochemicals that are being generated. One of them is dopamine. That one keeps you focused and feeling rewarded. One of them is anandamide, which is an endocannabinoid. It's one of those similar to cannabis kind of structure, binds to the similar receptors, and it's the bliss molecule. It's what gives this feeling, the it's what gives you the impression that it feels so good to be in that state.
Yeah.
And the third one is the one that keeps the state going. It's the endorphins. So this is our natural internal painkiller. If you're sitting on a chair for 4 hours but not in flow, your body's going to feel a little bit painful. But the when you're in a flow state, your endocannabinoids make you stop feeling that pain so that you can keep focused on whatever activity you're doing. And on so that's kind of the neurochemical side.
Yeah,
From a brain activity perspective, you're less into the overthinking of the prefrontal cortex. That part slows down a bit and you become more intuition guided. You become more like driven by something that's outside of you almost. And overall, although it's still an energetically expensive state to be in flow for 2 to 4 hours, it is super efficient in terms of what you get done in that 2 to 4 hours, which would be much more than if you were not in a state of flow.
definitely. Well, talking to so many entrepreneurs, I can really understand that for them because a lot of them they're not getting a lot done because they're worried about different things. They're not feeling good about the activity because obviously they're not in the flow state. From a and the flow seems to be very different from hyper productivity and really the hustle culture. Is that uh, the comparison you really make there? That's a very different state.
It's it's a lot to get into to understand how people understand these different terms. I think between flow and hyperproductivity, there's a lot of synergy and there's a lot of overlap, but it's not about hustle culture. It's not about squeezing in more. It's not about having fixed timings necessarily. It's really flow is about aligning your body, your behavior, and your mindset to ways that are more in alignment with your biology. And in ways, it's about eliminating the self-sabotage that comes from hustle culture.
Yes, well, yeah, well, we see so many people burn out in the society trying to meet those expectations of others, which is unrealistic. And what we see on social media is definitely not real. There's sets all over the world of for private jets to get a photography session, but it's not the reality of most entrepreneurs that are out there. And the ones that do make it are clearly producing at a higher level and they're looking for these things. It's not about that expectation, I feel, but to get into the flow state to achieve our optimal thing, because of course private jets aren't for everyone, and that's not the ultimate goal, and everyone just wants to achieve what their dream is. And what is the key ingredient or conditions to create that flow state? Where do we start?
There are a few key ingredients. If I had to boil it down to one, it would be unfair. Um, there's something that's called the flow cycle, and understanding the flow cycle is a good place to start. We have to appreciate that we cannot be in flow all day, every day. Otherwise, neurochemically, we'll burn out. Our brain needs time to be in those other states, like good mental recovery and like good sleep, in order to recharge the neurochemistry. But beyond that, there's the motivation piece, which is a lot around passion and purpose and feeling like you are in control with the outcomes of your life and where your life is headed. Anything that relates to passion and purpose is high dopamine driving. So if you're working on stuff that you like and enjoy, that means more tasks are going to be flowy. Another thing is about minimizing and eliminating any blockers to flow. So these are things like distractions, interruptions, poor patterns of mindsets, too much stress, too much overwhelm, lack of clarity. These kind of things eliminates everything that can be eliminated and minimize everything that can be minimized. And then on top of that, the general concept of the less you have to focus on, like the less projects you're involved with, the more you're going to tap into flow. Because the more projects you're involved with, the more your brain is going to connect different projects together. And it's just going to create exponential possibilities for distraction, and that also goes to how many relationships, how many volunteerings you have, how much content you consume from how many different sources. If you feel like you have to consume everything and do everything all the time, then you're just not going to have the time and space to get into the deep flow for fewer things. So those are some of the general things. And then there's the productivity side of things. There's the belief and mindset. And that's yeah, that's more getting
Well,
into
it's,
nitty-gritty.
yeah, it's really eating away your energy management. That's the versus the time management. Because I like to think that I
Yes,
can manage a lot of different things, and I'm quite blessed in the sense that I've got a lot of people I can delegate to. But at the same time, I know what you mean. I get a very scattered across all the projects, and I've been trying to itemize things down and possibly even do things on different days and say this is my day for this is my day for that. And but not all entrepreneurs have people to delegate to, and it can have that kind of thing. So they really do have to narrow it down to their core, don't they? It's yeah, to hit that flow state. So is it
exactly.
for someone who struggles with distraction fatigue or neurodivergence, where can they start? Because they've got additional challenges involved in that. Because it's definitely not the same for everyone hitting that point.
Absolutely. And I'm going to put the neurodivergence piece to the side and talk about that in a second. But I think this is the piece that applies to everyone. Everyone is dealing with an overwhelming 21st century. I mean, compared to 100 years ago, our brains haven't changed. Like, not one bit. It's been 3 or 4 generations since 100 years. The brain doesn't change. But what has changed is technology and society. What has changed is the internet, the speed of communication, the amount of emails that we get, the amount of social media that we get, all of these things. So, what one has to realize is surface level symptoms like procrastination and mental fatigue, they're going to come from a mix of factors, some of which are going to be lifestyle and environment, some of which are going to be a lack of skills. Just, do you know how to set clear goals? Do you know how to be in alignment with your biology? Do you know about biorhythms? Do you know when to stop caffeine, when to do or don't do exercise? Do you know how to place different tasks in different parts of the day in order to be more optimal in the dopamine levels that they're gonna give your brain? So all of these are just skills that can be learned, and that's a lot of what flow is about, is learning those skills to operate in alignment with your biology in the most optimal way. And once you've learned the skills, then you can uncover the unconscious parts that are leading to those symptoms. For example, procrastination, some of it can be due to a lack of skills, but some of it can also be due to fear, perfectionism, imposter syndrome, all these things. So until you've trained the skills, you can't really know how much it is unknown fears and about what that are contributing to that symptom.
A lot of self-assessment is in there, really to get there from what you've said, and it's
Absolutely.
yeah, and
And
well, also being honest with yourself, I guess. Yeah,
yeah, and one of the cool things when we look at productivity from a flow perspective and when we integrate spirituality and trauma awareness, we can actually look at every single moment of our day as a teacher that gives us the insights that we need about where our inner work is, about what fears are holding us back, what mindsets, what beliefs are holding us back, what therapy do we need to do in order to heal those inner child wounds that are going to stop that symptom forever. But you can't really know it unless you've trained the skills and known, okay, now I know I'm performing optimally in terms of the skills, I can eliminate that component from the equation and it simplifies the picture.
well, would you like to give the listeners a few simple exercises to get them started for those lifestyle shifts to so they can experience flow essentially whether because they've done their self-assessment, where are the next starting points? For
I tend to share a couple of different things in podcasts because they're quite immediately actionable. There's an idea that revolves around biorhythms, and a lot of productivity teaches this, but a lot of people have never heard of biorhythms and chronotypes. So some people are naturally more early birds, and some people are naturally more night owls, meaning the early birds want to wake up early, 5, 6, 7 a.m. The night owls want to wake up later, maybe 9, 10, 11 a.m. And depending on your, like, whether you're an early bird or a night owl is partly influenced by genetics and partly influenced by your own lifestyle preferences. And to a certain degree, it can change a little bit with training, depending on where you want it to go. But the point is, there's a different productivity recipe for different types. So if you're an early bird, you want to get your deep, focused, analytical work done in that morning part of the day and leave the more creative, less pressure, less cognitively taxing tasks for the afternoon. Whereas if you're a night owl, you want to do the opposite. You want to do the less pressure, more creative, more fun in the morning and the deep analytical, highly focused work in the afternoon. So just making that shift of what kind of tasks you do in what half of the day based on your personal chronotype, that's one thing that will lead to more efficiency. And for the people who are kind of mixed in between early bird and night owl, you can do a little bit of a mixed profile. But if you have this idea, you can keep it in mind when you're feeling like you can do something deep and analytical, then do it in the
Oh,
morning.
yeah, well,
But
I'm
if,
definitely a mixed
yeah,
profile. So
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
and a lot of the average person is not in the extremes, but at least when you know that there's a difference in the types of tasks that you have to do versus the type of energy you need to do them in, then you can adjust your day accordingly.
yeah.
And you balance that with other principles as well. So this is one of the principle to be in alignment with your chronotype based on your task types. Another thing that I tend to share on podcasts is around the dopamine levels of different tasks. So the brain likes to get into high dopamine states. When we evolved, new information, which was stuff that we pay attention to, meant that we would be more likely to survive. We would learn, is this plant edible or not? Does this sound mean that I'm gonna get killed, or does it mean that I'm gonna find food? Is this place, is this tree the one that I saw yesterday when I was near that new water source? So all the new information your brain registers as critical for survival. The problem in the 21st century is that every ding and boop and notification and email and social media and message, that's new information, and your brain treats it like it's a survival thing. And so when it comes to productivity, how do you apply this? Well, you want to organize your tasks in such a way that you'll be building dopamine in an increasing way before you take a break. What does that mean? If you're going to play video games, you're going to get a high level of dopamine and stimulation. Or if you're going to click on Instagram and doom scroll for a little bit, you're going to get a high stimulation. It's going to be a lot harder to do deep work after you do Instagram or video games than if you did it before. So you organize your day doing the deep work first, and then you reward yourself progressively with more dopamine activities until you take a break, like
You gotta,
lunch
you
or
gotta,
like a half an hour walk.
you gotta eat the
Then
vegetables before you get the dessert.
it's exactly the vegetables before desserts, but from a productivity and dopamine point of view.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a really simple key takeaway, but most people are self-sabotaging in this way because they don't know about how the dopamine works. And when we fire up our brain with high levels of dopamine like that, then when we get into the deep work, our brain is actually seeking to get back to that level of dopamine. And that's a part of the reason we get distracted.
Yeah. I've always found that I'm a bit of a mix of everything, and I guess well, entrepreneurs, you work with a lot of entrepreneurs, so that I guess they're all a little bit mixed because we all sort of work flat out, then we fluctuate on things, and if we took a bit more time to consider what order we're doing our tasks in, and what order we're doing our enjoyment in, then no doubt we'd achieve a lot more, and we wouldn't hit those mental exhaustion and roadblocks because we'd actually be performing in a flow state. And
Absolutely.
I think what people are considering because they're considering their own personal challenges and they're considering how flow has helped you in your life and how you've become to this point. And you've spoken publicly and also briefly on here about living with bipolar disorder and coming off medication. What was that like, and how did flow play a part in the role in that journey? Because I'm sure a lot of other people are thinking, oh, well, I've got this condition or that condition that could be holding me back, and I'm sure they could get a lot of value out of you have utilized this tool.
Great question. And this is the point where I want to circle back to that neurodivergence piece. So I was diagnosed with bipolar, but in my process of getting better from bipolar, I self-diagnosed with ADHD. And I actually my belief, because it's not a testable scientific theory for my case, but my belief is that mismanaged and unseen ADHD was one of the factors that led to my bipolar symptoms. So this is one thing to watch out for. But my point around anyone with neurodivergence is that, or not necessarily diagnosed, but maybe suspecting that they might be neurodivergent, is the concept that there's neurodivergence and there's an environment in which you operate. And these two things are inseparable. So, as much as, for example, genetics contributes to the creation of your body and mind, the way those genetics are expressed is not just dependent on genetics, but it's also dependent on trauma. It's dependent on your spiritual connection. It's dependent on your purpose. It's dependent on your lifestyle. And in order to get a true picture of how much of your life or symptoms are due to genetics purely and are unchangeable versus lifestyle, you actually need to train yourself in skills and mindsets and kind of work through in order to get a greater clarity. So, and for me, that's exactly what the journey was like. I didn't realize spiritual disconnection until I tuned into spirituality. And I had to make a lot of sense of the bipolar thoughts that I had, which were very existential, like believing that I'm God, believing that I'm Jesus, believing that uh the world is infinite, seeing in other dimensions, um all these really psychotic thoughts.
Yeah.
I had to integrate them in a way that makes sense. Um so it's important to realize that your personal experience is a factor because we live in a world where conditions and somewhat rightly so to a certain extent of being influenced by the authority of medical systems and all of this. And I'm not here to discredit the medical systems, nor am I here to discredit the usefulness of pills. But it's important to acknowledge that the medical system does not know everything. And in fact, they will never know as much about your own life as you do. So the key message is to really be empowered as the expert on your own life and be self-led in your investigation of the truth. Because I'm not going to say I'm not bipolar. I did experience psychosis. I did experience all of this. But the reason that I was led to a journey of quitting medication and finding out about ADHD and finding out about flow and improving my habits is because I was searching for my own truth. And that is something that only you can do with help and guidance from others. But deep down, it's something that only you can do.
No, definitely. Well, self-assessment is what you continue to come back to is really the that first step of working that out. And yes, the medical system I think is very under-resourced in order to be able to supply for the individual. So it's very much the case. So what would you somebody's I think the big thing around that though is it's some people are not just struggling with the productivity, but with mental clarity and self-trust in order to make those things. What would you sort of say to someone that was sort of struggling on that first stage?
Yeah, the clarity comes through doing, and there's no place that you can get to in some future time that will be less clear than where you are today, at least on an overall perspective. There's some, how can I phrase this? There's a way of looking at getting clarity, which would be about exploration and deepening. And if if we aren't clear on where we need to go or what we need to do or who we need to be, then we explore. We just go around in the world and we see what captures our attention the most. What do we like doing the most? What impact do we want to make the most? It depends on the question that you're looking at. Some people might want to focus on their productivity. Okay, if they're a business owner, they have a lot going on, probably. So, of all the tasks and all the ideas, you can just divide those into different projects and categories. With a little bit of mental exercise of exploring what all the possibilities are within each, you can start to make a list and you can start to prioritize that list and just keep plugging away at that list. And as you keep plugging away, this is the process of exploration. You will get that clarity, even if you don't have it now. And I think the self trust is around that. There's a few different pieces, but one of the things I bring a lot of people a deep appreciation for is the compound effect. Like we don't see the impact of micro actions on a day-to-day level, and a lot of self distrust comes from this lack of progress on the micro level. But what's the stress about achieving everything by tomorrow? It's not. Like one of the concepts of flow is you got to play the long game, and it's not about sexy hacks. It's not about a productivity trick that's going to solve it all. It's about getting really clear about the core of that drives you, getting really clear where you want to get to, and then working on things that are going to be high leverage. The 80/20 rule that a lot of entrepreneurs are familiar with. It's about compounding that leverage until you break through. Because maybe it's going to take years until you break through, and you might have self-distrust until you break through. But there's a neuroscience take on why we feel so bad about things not happening by tomorrow. The brain cannot compute the compound effects for longer than several months or a year, let alone 10 years. So give yourself the credits and the hope that if you gave yourself more time than where you think um, you should be having accomplished everything, you'll be able to relax more into it, and it'll be worth it. Like at the end of the day, we're all making bets on what we're doing is the best thing that we could be doing for ourselves.
The
So
compounding
make the
small
bet that
wins.
you're right.
Yeah,
Yeah, make the bet that you're right. Make the bet that your vision is correct. And make the bet that even if 99% of society says, oh, you should maybe do something else, or maybe you should it's not gonna work, or blah blah blah. Make that 1% bet against them and just keep going at it. And then when the results come through the compound effect, then you'll show them.
no, perfect.
But yeah, it really is a sort of multiple piece thing that comes with exploration, with action, and with self-belief and self-trust. That
That's it.
it's the
And,
long
and,
game
and
that matters.
accepting nothing happened. Rome wasn't built in a day, as they say. Yeah,
Exactly.
building up. Well, how do you blend neuroscience with spirituality? Because of course, there's always that debate between science and faith and spiritual items. And why is that combination so powerful for the healing and growth of yourself and your clients?
That's a deep question.
Yes.
So there's no contradiction in science and spirituality in the way I see it. Spirit science has been trying to explain why things behave in certain ways from a behavioral and predictive kind of perspective. I think spirituality is here to answer some of the questions that science maybe does not, maybe definitely does not, and maybe cannot even answer. Like, why is there consciousness, and what is consciousness exactly, and what happens after death, or where did I come from? Is reincarnation true or not true? I'm not here to tell anyone what to believe. I never have been. but I'm here to help people and guide them on their own journey to come up with their own answers. Because the brain is a filtering machine. Like the universe has infinite amount of data coming to you. Maybe all of what you see in the room, the colors, the sounds, the smell, what you perceive is a sliver of a hair in everything that the universe contains. So the brain is filtering the world based on your beliefs. And whether you think in a good way or in a positive, gratitude embracing way, or whether you think and in a growth perspective, like a growth mindset, or whether you think in a fixed and negative mindset, then that determines the actions you take, which then determines the results that you get. So there's neuroscience that that supports, of course, all of these, the links between your mindset, your beliefs, your actions, and your results. And the spiritual piece is about making sense of your worldview in such a way that it is like if there are questions that you would like answered and you don't necessarily have the answer and neither does science, then you might as well land on something to believe in that is productive and that is helpful. And that's one of the things. Um, and the other thing for spirituality is it's a healing modality in and of itself. Because for me, I had to dig into it because of my psychotic thoughts. I thought, okay, I've been in some weird states of consciousness. And because I've been inside of them, they must be real in some way. Now I need a way to integrate and make sense of that so that my brain can process them, archive them, and send them into, okay, this makes sense. Um, Without spirituality, I wouldn't have had a way of doing that. I wouldn't be able to. And so I would still feel the burden of, is there something wrong with me for having been in these states? Like, why are 98% of people in the world not psychotic? And why was I psychotic? Like, it gives a very ego-driven, negative perspective. And for me, I've gotten to the point in my spiritual exploration where I don't identify with the body or the mind. I identify with something that is beyond that. But 5 years ago, I did identify with the body and the mind. And so this journey of not identifying with body and mind means that no matter what disease I get, no matter what happens to my physical body, even if I get fat, even if I don't know, get cancer, then that's not me. That's not affecting me at my core because my core is beyond that. My core is spirit and consciousness that is beyond the body and mind. And so if you can get into the mindset that you're not going to be affected by getting fat, by getting cancer, by getting bipolar labels, then your life is going to be a whole lot better than if you think, oh damn, I'm going to be crippled by
Yeah.
these diseases and these labels. So that's the healing aspect of spirituality.
It is a great mix, and there's so much unexplained, and I see many things because you got to have faith, and everything is the energy around you as well, and also we're all on that journey of life, so there's always going to be something that comes through for us, that's all just part of it, part of the fun, and you
Exactly.
meet it in a flow state. I think is the real message, and it's yeah. So what does your coaching or training look like, and who is it for? Who are you really looking for, Anthony? And how does that look if somebody jumps on a call with you?
It's tended to be that I've worked with a lot of spiritual entrepreneurs who may or may not be diagnosed with ADHD, but definitely experience some of the symptoms of ADHD, distractions, a lot of mental clutter, lot of tabs open in their head, feeling exhausted, feeling like they're never really accomplishing any project because they're just starting new things all the time. And there's beautiful reasons for that. We reframe all of that and we basically get to a point of understanding their own brain and using it in the most optimal way. So typically how we start is with something for free. I have a top 21 tips, actionable insights from Flow Neuroscience PDF that I share.
I,
It's a heavy guide, and that's because it's not about the 1, 2, 3 hacks, and it's not about um, it's something that is definitely universally applicable. As you might recall from whether you're an early bird or a night owl, there is an insight there to take away. So it doesn't matter what your style is. It's similar with a lot of these other 20 plus things. So I share that in a PDF, and
I
from
did
there,
see that on your website. So we'll make sure that we have your website link
yeah,
in the description, so the listeners can definitely grab that. And
mm,
of course, your website is where people can learn more about your work and your content on your programs, or you're quite active on a certain social media that you'd like.
yeah, I'm more active on Facebook and Instagram as well as LinkedIn. So those are my top three platforms if you want to see any content. And yeah, I would definitely say the first step would be to grab that PDF and uh and take it from there.
Yeah, and
You'll
then really
see.
open that conversation with you, Anthony. And of course, yeah, all the links so you can all get in contact with Anthony will be in the comments, and you can snap up that PDF, which is a free resource. I did see it on the website, and yeah, and of course we got to hit our signature question of the interview before we head towards a wrap up, because attention is the currency, and if attention is the currency, Anthony, what is one thing you believe people should be investing more of it in right now?
It's so hard to say one thing. But I will there are two things that come to mind, and I will boil them down to one thing. I will say that the one thing is to reach your highest performance as a human being, to reach your ultimate, your peak performance. So some people will preach sleep, some people will preach flow, some people will preach heal your trauma. And I think all of this boils down to all of these are pathways that lead to reaching your ultimate potential. Because we're in the 21st century, the world is overwhelming. The amount of learning curves that we have to go through with a world that is changing so rapidly and changing even more rapidly with the rise of AI and the job market changing, the entrepreneurship market changing, the day-to-day life changing. I mean, soon we'll have robots in our households doing tasks that's
I,
I don't know,
I
I can't
already
even
have one.
imagine.
I have one on order already that vacuums and mops the floor, and it vacuums
Yeah,
the whole house. It's a great time to
that's
be alive, and it's
Yeah, and that's just the beginning because in this journey of life, you're gonna have to deal with the learning curve of navigating robots as a customer service. You're gonna have to deal with new cybersecurity. You're gonna have to deal with virtual reality. And all of this is just so many demands on your brain, so many demands on your focus and your attention. So the sooner you get to becoming the ultimate version of you, and really performing at your highest level so that you can reach your goals faster with less efforts, the better of an experience in life you're going to have, and also the greater physical and mental well-being you're going to have. And personally, I would say start with training flow. Like this is one of the fastest and highest leverage ways to do that. But of course, there are other focus areas. Flow doesn't cover everything. Like it doesn't deal much with trauma. But
yeah.
yeah, become the best version of yourself.
No,
Train
that's
yourself.
perfect. That will go into our Hall of Fame for things to pay attention to right now. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
Anthony, your journey, honesty, and approach to flow are exactly what this world needs more of. To everyone listening, if you felt scattered, overstimulated, or out of sync, flow isn't some mystical peak state. It's your natural state once you clear the noise. Go to palacin.co.uk, connect with Anthony, very highly recommended you do that, and start learning how to train your brain, regulate your energy, and create your most aligned, focused self. Because attention is the currency, and nothing is more valuable than knowing where to spend it. And we'll see you all in the next episode. Thank you very much, Anthony, for joining us.
Thank you so much. Such a pleasure.